Hi again. Nice to see everyone here. I know there are a ton of familiar faces in here, so I'm happy to see you all and hope to catch up with you. Thank you to BRIC for having me here. One of my favorite organizations since I've started this work. So thank you again for all participating. I'm going to offer a presentation on a report that CSS published last year in partnership with the Lionsgate Inclusion Content Team to kind of ground the panel that we're about to have. Just a little bit about the center. I don't know if it's working. Sorry. Okay, there we go. That's me. So a little bit about the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. It's the only adolescent-centered organization that brings together the academic and creative communities to unlock the power of storytelling to help the next generation thrive and grow. Um, we while most of our work is focused on adolescence, we also have a body of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion across the entertainment industry. We think that kind of research and that data is one and the same as and very on mission for us in terms of producing content that supports adolescents and their positive development. And so this report is kind of a product of that arena of our work and the kind of partnerships that we engage in with studios, production companies, et cetera. This is a great team that worked on this project. Some of the authors, and this is our founder, Dr. Ools, which many of you know, I'm sure, founder and executive director of the center. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to do my best to do justice to this fantastic report that took a very long time and a lot of effort from these folks to put together. So this is probably really busy for you, and I'll kind of come back to the overview of what was done. But essentially, in terms of our DEI work and inclusion work, we really like to add to a lot of the existing material and the findings that are out there from these organizations like USC, like we heard from Dr. Pieper earlier. We're in great company when we're doing this work. And I think our value add is kind of being able to dig in a little bit deeper into some of the questions that are raised around DEI advocacy and entertainment. So we have a body of work called Authentically Inclusive Representation, where we consider AIR at the narrative level. So kind of beyond counting folks on and behind the screen and really considering what is authentically inclusive storytelling at the narrative level. And so this report is kind of in that vein, right? Getting to, as Dr. Pieper mentioned earlier, those decision-making biases and those prejudices that act as barriers to advancing our progress toward our representation and inclusion goals. So for this study, we wanted to address or consider this perception in the industry that first-time directors are riskier, that you're kind of taking a scary bet on hiring a first-time director. And that is a barrier to entry for many women, many people of color in this space, and kind of maintains the status quo among the pool of directors of feature films specifically. So when we, and I'll go back here to show you kind of what we did really quickly. We collected the 100 titles, 100 films from a 12-year period, and identified the director for each of those films, identified them by race and gender, and then also designated them as experienced directors or first-time directors. So if they had directed a feature film in the past, they were considered experienced, and otherwise they were considered first time. And so we got to this breakdown of that pool, right? And so almost 77% of experienced directors are still overwhelmingly white and male. And there is a bit more diversity in the first-time directors pool, but this is sort of the status as of 2021. That was the end of the data set that we had. We also collected box office numbers, critical audience perception reviews, and production budgets for these titles. Ran some regressions. I won't get all into that, but to kind of predict where we would go if we kind of stayed on this path. And what we found that it would take 175 years to reach gender parity, 68 years to reach racial parity, right? These very striking statistics. very alarming. But we like to stay positive at the center, where we we like to think that things can be done, right? Like we're studying this and offering these findings so that people can act. And we'll get to the kind of headline of this in a second. Um, so what we found, right, after studying this pool and studying their sort of access to opportunity, the success, the return on investment for these folks, this is the major headline, right, from the study, is that first-time directors deliver similar domestic box office ROI and reviews as experienced directors when adjusted for production budgets. And in addition to this, I forgot to mention, the team also conducted qualitative interviews with 6 industry executives and 6 directors. And so we have a ton of quotes and qualitative data that is also included in the report, which I will allow you to download later. You can, there's a QR code that you'll be able to see. Another that I wanted to point out is this third finding, which I find really interesting, is that, and this is sort of related to the keynote earlier. They were talking about having that opportunity to fail, right? And like getting that shot, getting that chance, right? And who gets that opportunity. And so with this data, we found that before their first major feature, women have to prove themselves by directing 41% more projects than men. And so this was kind of striking to me. And then you see we have quotes down here from some of the folks that we interviewed to give some color and some nuance to that. And another one of the perceptions that we addressed in this study was that women or people of color are averse to big budget 4-quadrant films, don't want to direct that kind of thing. And so we have a ton of evidence in the report as well that speaks against that. And so this is something that we hope from the center that folks can use, right, when you're making these arguments in the spaces, you know, with stakeholders and decision makers. We have evidence to prove that women, people of color, first who make up more of the first-time director pool, are not riskier, and it's actually a good bet. It's good for the bottom line and good for the world, which is what we like to demonstrate. And we offered a few recommendations from this. So, and much of this, many of you probably already know, but setting specific hiring goals for underrepresented first-time directors is really important to reaching this parity more quickly than, you know, as we see it would take if we kept on the same path. Evaluating pitches, projects, and hires with an AIR lens and AIR tool. So thinking about the scripts that you're sending to first-time directors, to women, to people of color, to make sure that it's something that they'd be interested in, or giving them the power to adjust and make those shifts and changes um, in the script if that's necessary for them. Um, and investing in pipeline programs and initiatives that guarantee a job opportunity for underrepresented directors versus those opportunities that simply offer mentorship. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to shout out the AME HRTP initiative with BRIC. I have the pleasure of serving on that advisory board. So it's yes, that's definitely worth a round of applause. Doing amazing work there. And so, you know, more of that, 100%. I think, I don't even know what time it is. So this was like a lot to cover. But if you want to learn more about the report, you want to share it out with your networks or look at any of our other resources on the website, you can follow the QR code. The AIR reports, as I mentioned earlier, is connected to this body of work because we work with a lot of advocacy organizations across the industry to produce this AIR rating, and then also make that business case that a higher AIR rating leads to higher box office success. Okay. And our Teens and Screens 2023 report, I also want to shout out. It went pretty viral last year, pretty cool. So take a look at that. We've got a ton of research, a ton of tools and resources for storytellers, and also for folks who, again, are in the rooms with those decision makers. And I think that's all. So I'll stop there. And I have also been charged with introducing our fantastic moderator for the next panel, Stafford. Um, Can I introduce you? Is that okay? Okay. Zach Stafford is an award-winning journalist, editor, and Tony Award-winning producer of the Broadway musical A Strange Loop. He is a current co-host of the Stitcher Sirius XM podcast Vibe Check, which the New York Times named one of the best podcasts of 2022. Stafford was the first Black editor in chief of The Advocate, served as the chief content officer of Grindr, and was a journalist at The Guardian. He is the author of two books entitled Boys and When Dogs Heal, and currently serves on the board of directors of the American LGBTQ Plus Museum. In 2019, he was included in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list and named as one of the 100 most influential Black people living today by The Root. That's amazing. I love that. Thank you.
Can you hear me? You can. That is so embarrassing to hear your bio read as you stand at the front. I was like, oh, this is every nightmare I've had since I was a child. Anyway, I'm Zach. I am a co-host of a show called Vibe Check with Sam Sanders, who is funnier than me. And I did not realize that until I was sitting in the audience just now. So bear with me as I try to be funny like him. Um, I would love to introduce the panel. If the panelists could come up right now. I see Tatiana's there, but I don't know where everyone else is at. Hi. Okay. Um, we have one more, Julie. Oh, there you are. Here we go. Hi. We've not been in person yet. We've just Zoomed. So this is fun to actually see people in real life. Um, to get going, I'd love to have each of you introduce yourself and talk as much as you want because that bio they read for me was too long and should not have been read. So I'd love to go on my right.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Tatiana Navarrette. First, I just want to say a huge thanks to Nicole and Allison for bringing us all together and for making this event possible. It is really beautiful to see so many amazing leaders in this room, and I feel really honored to be part of this. So, I, at 8 years old, found myself a storyteller. I kind of grew up with very little technology, and so I was kind of forced to play and create and think of stories. And I found I had a really big heart for change. And once I picked up a camera, my family's home camera was probably like 480p or something like that. I found myself telling these stories about LGBTQ individuals, individuals of diversity, people from different backgrounds and things like that. And I really had this insane realization that I could change the world with the power of filmmaking and just using my voice. And so that is what is I'm here to do on this earth, and I'm gonna go do it. But I made this film. It's called Born This Way, and it is a film that was very vulnerable for me to share as it's based on my true story, and it took a lot of courage because it is controversial. And through making that film, I was able to, on my own, without the help of a studio, push it on social media and market it to a wide, large audience. It's gotten over 8 million views, just certain clips of it on social media, which is insane. But it has been a journey of determination and really fighting for LGBTQ youth rights and LGBTQ youth advocacy. And the outreach from there has been insane. And it's amazing how we can really use our voices to change the world.
And good morning. My name is Sarah Eaglehart. Chante washe na pe chuzape. I greet you with a good heart. Wambly shinawi amachiapi. My Lakota name is Eagle Shaw Woman, and I'm from Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. As I was listening to the report earlier, I was thinking about how I pretty much have broken every rule that you're supposed to do. I guess the formula that you're supposed to follow. I guess I always saw Lakota people or indigenous peoples in general, it's always hard. And I feel like with the systems that are really breaking the different issues or stories out into different segments, hasn't really worked for me because I feel like it's much more of a holistic approach that I take. So back in 2019, I won a Daytime Emmy for a virtual reality project with John Legend, and that was actually my first project. So got lucky as a producer, and it was really because of I built such great relationships with different people around advocacy issues that I cared about and that they cared about. So recently, I also was a EP on Lakota Nation versus the United States, which came out and premiered at Tribeca. Thank you. And that was with my really good friend Mark Ruffalo, and we cared about the same issues, and so I also wrote a book with my identical twin sister, who's a psychotherapist. It's called Warrior Princesses Strike Back. It's all about how we see the world from growing up on the reservation, because it's really a personal development memoir. Because the way that all of my work that I've done in my life has really been around advocating for and educating on Native American issues. And of course, if you've ever done any of that advocating work, sometimes it can feel like you're treading water and that you don't really move at all. And I think that's what really attracted me into going into storytelling, because I thought, you know what, you want to know about Lakota people, indigenous issues, read the book. You want to see, Lakota people, like watch the film, And so for me, it was just a faster way of getting to impact that I really care about. And so now I get to work with Twyla True, who's also Lakota, and she has True Family Enterprises and is using a lot of her capital investment to really help tribal communities. So I work on a lot of different projects with her. She's turned me from a nonprofit person into for-profit. And so we actually are working on renewable energy infrastructure, all this stuff with tribal communities. And we just launched the Indigenous Fashion Collective, which is going to be like an Indigenous CFDA. So we're really excited about that as well.
I'm Julie Zackary, and I'm not nearly as interesting as these other two women. I am a producer and studio leader. I've worked in visual effects and animation my entire career. I have built teams and I have really worked on supporting those teams, whether it be my own teams in a show that I'm working on or through a facility as a head of production. So my work is with the people who help support the storytellers. My work is with in partnership with the storytellers. And I just finished a movie you might have heard of called Nimona. The other producer, Karen Ryan's right over there. We just to give you a little snippet of what happened. You guys have probably heard, but the studio went through a merger, and then it went through a shutdown, a studio shutdown, and then it went through an acquisition. And yet Nimona persevered, and we just celebrated with an Academy nomination. So super proud of the work that we did, but also thank you, but also super proud of the people who fought for this movie, because this was a movie that was an important story to tell. It was an unapologetically fierce female who was who she was. It's a story that we all can relate to. We've all felt othered. We've all felt like we didn't belong. We've all felt like an imposter. Not maybe to the level as the LGBTQ community is, unfortunately, but it is something that we can all relate to. So it was a really important thing that we fought to tell, and we are so proud that we got it out there into the world.
Amazing people, right? Incredible, incredible, incredible. So Julie, you actually helped lead us to what my first question is going to be. And before I ask the question, I want to pay respect to a very famous woman in Hollywood. Her name is Kris Jenner, and she's the inspiration behind this question. So Kris Jenner has famously said, if you ever receive a no, that means you're talking to the wrong person. And I live by that every day of my life. It's very big Karen energy, but it works, and it helps you get what you need in the world. And so much of your story, Julie, was a lot of no's, a lot of big no's, but you somehow found a yes, found a yes that led you to an Oscar nomination. So I'd love to begin with you and then go down the line with each of you about how you overcome no's in the creative process to get things off the ground, because all of you represent underrepresented groups who are going to be told no immediately, but you've each found a way to circumvent that no. So Julie.
That's a really good question, and that's a multi-layered answer, because the person who rams their head against the wall until it breaks says, "I just keep going," but I know that's not necessarily realistic. It's about understanding and believing in what you have, understanding and believing your mission. And I don't know if it's something that just triggers where you know that you have something to fight for, that you just keep going. But you do have to pivot every once in a while when there's too many no's or there's too much feedback. It's a loop. But it's also something that if you have conviction, if you're telling an authentic story, if you believe in what you're doing, there will be a way. And it sounds very airy fairy a little bit, but it's like, no, it's not. You if you have power behind your belief, you will find it. And it might not be the right person who's saying yes. It might be another door that we're knocking on. When we were trying to save Nimona, we knocked on many doors, and there were a lot of no's. There were a lot of people who didn't want the risk of a studio. They didn't want the risk of the content. They didn't want the risk of making another movie in the pandemic. But eventually somebody did connect, and that was Megan Ellison, and she did say yes. So we just kept on going. That's kind of a non-answer, but that was our experience with Nimona.
No, I think it's a great answer because you showed such incredible perseverance, but even before that, a commitment to the story that you knew had to be out there. And it takes that type of commitment to get these things across a line or even finding the line, which you did. Sarah.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that question because I think for me, it's been more about me saying no to something that if it didn't fit what I believe in or my value system. And so I'll get pitched stories from different groups of people, and for me it's I will just say no if I don't think that, if it's a non-native person writing a script about or a story, a documentary about Lakota people, but they don't know anything about our community or and so for me, like, it's like, I'm sorry, but no, it's not going to work because when whenever I'm having to educate, which I've done my whole, entire career, it's like, okay, do I want to work on a production with somebody that knows nothing about my community? That means it's already a heavy lift, period. But then now it's even more of a heavy lift. And so for me, it's like I don't think like we have to be able to work differently. And then even if somebody asked me to join a project that is about my people and it has the right people, like I love everybody that was on Lakota Nation versus United States. My very good friend Jesse Sharple was directing. But when they asked me to EP, I had demands from like the get go. I was like, well, actually, like, I need to make sure that this story is told in a very holistic manner because I know my people well enough to know what they're going to get mad about. And so I was like, it can't be about this one angle of the story. It needs to be more holistic. And like I was like, or I can't do it. Like that's just how it is. And thankfully, like when we did it, they agreed. They agreed to make it more holistic. And everybody in our community loved it, which is sort of unheard of. Like I'm not kidding. Because like Lakota people, we're very direct. And so to hear our community and even the tribal leaders love the story was really incredible. The no that we did get that was disappointing was that we were not nominated for an Academy Award. So that was a bit disappointing to us. So I guess I'm still learning how to deal with that no.
I love that. Tatiana.
Um, I don't know if you guys know the great show Friends, but
It's a small show.
yeah, there's a scene where Ross is like carrying a couch and he goes, pivot, very classic line. I feel like anytime I get a no, I always think of that. And I'm like, okay, time to shift gears, time to try again. Unfortunately, I was born with like insane determination. I don't know how that happened. It just like happened. And I think anytime I hear a no, it's a reminder to me that that I have to be my biggest believer in. If I believe in it and if I want to make it happen, I will make it happen. It's a matter of me putting my best foot forward every day and what can I do? What steps can I take to get there and to reach my goals? I think a lot of times I like to think that I don't have a plan A, you know, there's no plan A for me or plan B, not even a plan C. I like to say I have a plan alphabet. And so I freaking kick down every door that comes my way. And, you know, I've jumped out a couple windows, you know, broken down some things with baseball bats. Like I've just continually gone. And until I got there, I think it's just having a pure belief that anything's possible. And if you just keep going, you're gonna find something and you're gonna hit what you want.
Oh, I love that. What you just said kind of reminds me of the story of the writer Cord Jefferson, who just won an Academy Award this past weekend for his work on American fiction. Cord, like Sam and I, we're journalists, and then we pivoted into Hollywood, and now we're trying to figure out how to live in this changing landscape after media kind of crumbled, sadly. But Cord got his movie off the ground by doing literally everything on it, and he's like, I found the story, I believed in it, I wrote it, I produced it, I directed it, and then it worked. And the data that we saw before this does prove that that's worth investing in. But you know, we as people only have so much time in our days and only so much resource to deploy to make things happen. So I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you make that decision to go all in on one creative project? Because with Nimona, you spent a lot of time trying to get that across the line, but there's a world where no yes ever came. And then there's the grief, like our last panelist was talking about, that hits, and that can be destabilizing.
That's a good question. And with Nimona in particular, you know, again, it seems like a little woo woo, but the universe was not going to let this project die. I was not going to let this project die. So going all in on that, I've never experienced it in my life. I worked on Stuart Little too. That was not worth saving. Sorry, Rob. And all entertainment is worth saving. I'm I'm being flippant, but I had never worked on a show that I believed so much in, and it was hard. It was during the pandemic. I had moved my company, my family across the country to go work at Blue Sky. Now all of a sudden we were stranded in Connecticut. Who wants to be there? And yeah, we had this story to tell, and there was sadness, and there was hurt, and there was pain with the studio closing and with what I had done to my family by dragging them across the country to a job that no longer existed. But the story was so relatable, and I felt like Nimona. I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt that I had struggled, and I had in all of my life. So having something that you can connect so purely will get you through those moments. And it's not to say we should suffer for art. We shouldn't, but we should know that if you have conviction, if you have belief, if you're telling an authentic story that you can get behind, then there is no stopping. It wasn't even a question.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes. So how do you, as a creator, producer, person making art in the world, decide when to go all in on a project where there's a lot of risk in front of you?
So my answer would actually be pretty similar to your woo-woo answer. It's really about intuition and I think timing. So I've seen that in business opportunities or what have you. Like we'll have a story and it just takes the right time. Like I'm not, for me, it's like I've been working on a particular story for probably 3 years, you know, since before the pandemic. And then it's going to actually be my directorial debut. And I have no doubt that we're going to get all the funding for it. We already have half the funding. So for me, I'm like, okay, it's just going to come when it's meant to come. And I really believe that. Other things you get intuition about, like, oh, this has to happen right this second. And it's about like following that gut feeling where you're just hustling and like reaching out to your network to see, okay, who is the right person. And so for me, it's more about like when I pray for a project or pray for a story or whatever, it's more about like I pray that the right person comes to me to help me do.
I think for me, I primarily find myself when a project scares me to death because of whether it's the level of like vulnerability or the level of um, perseverance I have to put into this project, knowing just to get it off the ground. I feel like that's what I just get so like entangled in the downward spiral of like, oh, I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna fail. It's hard. And in projects like that scare me, I know that's where the magic is found and where the magic is really going to happen. And I think the reason it scares me is because I've got something good here, you know? And I've been working on becoming more vulnerable, especially my most vulnerable project was this past project that I did, Born This Way, based on my true story, being an LGBTQ camp coordinator that was closeted, who kind of is confronted with my sexuality because of a trans camper who came to camp. And so that was a really hard story to tell because number one, it was based on my true story. Number two, it was still very fresh, triggering, hard to share in the first place. And then to put it so publicly on such a public platform where many people can judge, many people can, say their opinions about my life and my journey. It's all been worth it because I've found the impact it has made on the community, the impact it has made in churches, the impact it has made on the LGBTQ youth, people coming out to their parents, churches adopting affirming policies, camps hosting queer camps for the first time, Christian summer camps. It's insane. It's been phenomenal what just sharing your voice and being vulnerable could do for your community, let alone the world.
Well, we only have 3 more minutes left, and I'd love to end looking at the more macro level in which you all are creating. You know, we've been talking a lot about Hollywood, and Hollywood has a lot of things going on, but Hollywood sits inside a country called the United States, which has even more going on right now. And the environment in which I find myself waking up into every day as a Black queer person is increasingly becoming more hostile in ways that I did not expect in 2024. And when you work in entertainment and you're championing work that is about my lived experience, your lived experience, et cetera, you're getting a target in many ways put on your back. And I think all of your work has probably had a lot of pushback over the past few years. How are you navigating moving forward, continuing to do these stories that you care about in a climate that is going to push back even more?
That's a tough one. It's and I can only speak from our experience with Nimona, is when you have a story to tell and you believe in it, there is an appetite. We got nominated. And it was a good story and it was accepted. And that what that told us was you are a good storyteller, you are a good group of filmmakers. We want to hear more stories like that. And the content, yes, it turned off a big swath of the country, but it also brought in a huge part of the country that hadn't actually been brought into films like that, especially in animation. So when you have good stories to tell and you now know that there is a market for it, guess what, studios, we're going to keep telling those stories.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think of this the storytelling for Indigenous people. I mean, you see right now we're sort of at this moment, and it's actually a moment that we want to extend, right? And we want to build upon. And so I don't know that my direction changes at all, actually. I feel like we're going to triple, quadruple down right now. And I think that's where we're at right now is just continuing to educate and build and show that, people want to hear these stories about Indigenous people. And it is an untapped market of stories that have not been told.
Pushback is hard. It definitely, I mean, like we're all human at the end of the day. We're all living, breathing creatures. We have to eat, we have to sleep. It's one of those things that can be incredibly difficult to navigate as well, especially for anyone who's like on a public forum, to fail on a public level, also hard to get pushback in that regard as well is hard. But I think sometimes when I get pushed back really hard, I know people are listening and I know people hear me and that they're processing what they're saying. And they came to the conclusion that they didn't like it, but they heard me. And that's all I needed.
I love that. That's such a confident way to deal with this. That's how when someone tweets at me something negatively, I'm gonna be like, at least you heard me, girl. At least you heard me. So, well, anyway, thank you all. Your work is incredible. It's important. Thank you for being here today.